talk about time travel and hair loss. Hi, I'm your host, Nick Shell. All we talk about here is hair loss because that's the only thing that you want to talk about. I've tried talking about other things. You demand it. Hair loss, let's talk about only that. Because if you don't, I won't watch the video. Okay, so yeah, I get it. I've been doing this. I've got 1,500 subscribers now. And actually, it fell by my foot here. Here it is. I thought I had a comment. Okay, this is from Robert, actually. We all know Robert. He lives somewhere on the West Coast, and he's a couple years younger than me. Robert. And the video I made yesterday that he's referring to is thinning vertex. I just don't see the problem. Do you? And Robert had this to say. This is an excerpt. He said, quote, freaking out may be appropriate for someone younger with a more aggressive variety of balding, and early intervention is important if you're a younger balding dude who doesn't want to go bald. Many opt to let it go. Either approach is fine as far as I'm concerned, end quote. I completely agree with Robert, and that's the mature way to look at things. We have to accept the fact that certain people are okay with losing their hair. We have to accept that certain people are not okay with losing their hair. We have to accept that I'm one of the people who is okay with accepting losing my hair, but that yet I like to help people who haven't got to that point of acceptance yet with themselves. And we have to accept the fact that I do this for the money. We have to accept all of those things because those are the foundations of this channel. Otherwise, people think I'm obsessed with hair loss. No, I'm obsessed with making money, and if I can help someone, I will. So, if you're new to this channel, you just subscribe. There's what you need to know. All right, let's talk about this. I like the fact that Robert pointed out that some people are okay, like me, with losing their hair, while others, they need to save their hair. What I want to talk about, and I want to tie this into time travel. Let's think about time travel for a moment. We're all obsessed and intrigued with time travel. Obviously, if we had access to a time machine and we could go back in time, we can immediately think of some things that we'd want to change in our own past to make our lives better in the future and our present, right? And why is that? Well, because at the time those mistakes happen or those decisions were made in our past, we didn't have enough life experience to be wise enough to make the correct decision, so we made the wrong decisions. So naturally, if I could go back now and go to high school, I can think of several things I do differently because I wasn't mature enough to understand what I needed to know at the time. And that's how life is. It's constantly in this situation where we're constantly underprepared for what we need to know to get us through it, and ultimately we just kind of figure it out. We kind of fake it till we make it, we wing it, and hope that it all comes together pretty decently. And it does, but still though, if we could only know then what we know now, in theory, life would be better, right? It's the concept that it's a lack of knowledge of what we'll learn in the future that's holding us back in the past, which ultimately determines our future to begin with, which controls our present day. Follow me? Yes, you do. So, let's talk about this. Let's talk about guys that subscribe to my channel and are younger than me and have less hair than me. So whereas I'm 36 years old and Norwood 3, let's consider someone who is about to turn 22, early 20s, and he's already more like a Norwood 4.5. He's at the point where like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to shave my head. I'm going to buzz it off. I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. So he does. And I've had people comment back after they do this, and this is ultimately what they say. They say, Nick, I can't believe I didn't do that sooner. I wish I would have known. Life is actually better without hair anyway. It's less shampoo. It's less hassle. Life is still just as good. I'm not missing out on anything else except for wasted time and energy thinking about my hair. I've gotten that comment several times from people who have converted, who have adopted their new identity as the bald guy. Now, some would say that's not fair that this guy in his young 20s, he doesn't get to have the hairs most of it. He has to be the bald guy. He's going to be working out, having a nice body, shaving his head, and he's confident in that. But still, that's not fair because look at Nick. He makes over $50 a month by talking about hair loss, and he's a hypocrite because he still has hair. How's that fair? Well, here's how it's fair. I think here's the trade-off of what we're looking at. So if you're young and you're balding, consider this kind of the trade-off. And I'm not saying we would choose either way. I'm just saying this is how the reality of how it is. If you are in your young younger years, if you are in your early 20s and you're losing your hair and you know this, instead of saying, oh, well, look at Nick, he's still got most of his hair and he's in his mid-30s, I wish I could make it his. Here's the thing that you have that I don't have. You have the ability to accept your fate as the guy who's going to be bald young. You're going to overcome that obstacle before I can. And you're going to get further in life in a certain degree than I could, because I spent so many of my 20s and my early 30s focusing on things I couldn't control, having insecurities that ultimately I let hinder me. I was a slave to this master of all of these things that I thought were holding me back when in reality they weren't. And that's why when guys end up shaving their head in their early 20s and accepting, okay, I'm the bald guy, I'm okay with it now, they have an advantage in life that the rest of us tend not to. They learn this life lesson quicker. They're forced to learn this life lesson. So I want to tell you this because ultimately, as it relates to time travel, if only I could have known those things when I was in my early 20s, I wouldn't have had as many obstacles and things allowing to slow me back that I was ultimately putting on myself. I was allowing those, like people hurting my feelings, I would let people control my emotions up until a couple years ago. And then I realized, wait, I'm the one who controls that. People can only offend me if I allow them to. You know, things like that. So it's like, that's a lesson I wish I could go back to my younger self and teach myself. But I think it's this concept that if you're a younger guy going bald and you go ahead and shave it and accept that you're the bald guy and embrace it and work out, what an advantage, what a burden lifted that you have that the rest of us aren't. The rest of us who will look at our hair and think, okay, well, when's this thing finally going to end? Like me, and I've mentioned this referencing the Metallica song, but none of you care enough about Metallica to say, oh yeah, Metallica. But when he's talking about in Ride the Lightning about let's just get this over with. And you know, that's kind of how I feel at times. I'm like, I'm fine with this, but I don't want to have to think, when's this finally going to happen? Like, let's just get it over with. Let me just be the bald guy. Let me be that my identity. But I guess for me personally, I still feel that I owe it to myself to keep a hair for a while I still can, because the majority of my life I won't have that option. But when you're 21, 22 and don't have that option, that's one less thing to worry about. And I see that as an advantage. Guys who go bald younger have the advantage of learning that lesson sooner and earlier than the rest of us. And that's an advantage of time travel, learning things sooner than maybe most people would at the same age. I hope that makes sense, because I totally dig it. Time travel, going bald in your early 20s, the lessons you learn because of that the rest of us don't. That's an advantage.